Oakland County is home to 62 of Global 100 OEMs, to 50% of the Fortune 500 companies, and nearly 70% of the global automotive R&D. Representing the northern region of Detroit, Oakland County is recognized as the by the US Department of Commerce as one of the leading experts in inbound FDI to North America. The Connected Vehicle Initiative aims to deploy the connected car world's first county-wide connected cars program. So we're no longer talking about individual players in an ecosystem trying to move individual parts of it, but the county-wide initiative. And Matthew Gibb, who was appointed in 2011, is responsible for all aspects of economic affairs, and he will share with us the insights on the journey towards connected cars county. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. You may say, well, he's a government guy. Why would I listen to a government guy? I'm here for connected mobility. We started a task force about 3 years ago, and I'm a real estate attorney by training. But I used to represent the cellular industry, and so I know a lot about wave spectrum technology and how that works within the world, and somehow I got tasked with building this task force. And the task force, as we'll walk through, has been charged with some very specific things. Some things a little far afield, but you'll see kind of the mentality to it. But to give you some context of why a government guy might be able to get educated, as you already started to hear a little bit about our community, where the heck are we? The northern region of Detroit, of course. You heard 70% of global R&D. We're actually up to 75 of the top 100 Tier 1 automotive and global OEMs are located in our county. And if we add Google and Uber and Apple and Savari and Arata and some of the other Silicon Valley companies, they now have opened research and development centers in our county as well. And so I think Apple's almost a car company. They could certainly buy Fiat Chrysler if they wanted to. So that number goes a little bit higher. And if you've never been to Michigan, it's a pretty cool place. It's not as nice as Barcelona, but we're trying hard. What gives us the right to really talk about this? Any government official should admit that they're not smart enough to realize what to do. And the government officials that get on the stage and say, we believe in connectivity and we believe we're going to deploy connected mobility, they really need to have a plan and need to have an understanding of who they should be listening to. So I'm very blessed. We got a lot of smart people in Oakland County, 1.3 million people, so we're not too huge, but the region itself is almost 6 million people. Just in my county, double the number of PhDs and master's degrees than anywhere in the United States. We have more engineers per capita than Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the United States. I take advantage of those things, talking to those people, making sure that I know who they are. For the automotive companies, I don't have to worry about being a owner of a company that has to talk to only its customers, to build a solution only for its customer. I can talk to all 75 of those top 100 globals. Matter of fact, we have more than 800 automotive-related companies in Oakland County. I can speak to any of them at any time. The bottom point here, 1,062 foreign-owned multinational firms. So if I want to know what's being deployed in Germany, I don't have to go to Germany. I can simply go talk to my friends at Bosch or at Brose or any of the number of the 270-plus German automotive companies that are working in our market. If I need to know what they're deploying in South Korea, then I talk to my South Korean companies. If I need to know what's happening in Japan, I talk to Denso. I talk to Kawasaki and others that are there. Fanuc Robotics, all of those companies are there. So I have a very good, robust basis. And of course, we are the automotive Motor City, although I kind of tease my friends from Detroit. Oakland County, which is the northern suburbs of Detroit, is where the concentration of autos are. So the one stat I like really is more than 25% of all the auto patents in the last 45 years have been one per day out of our region. So it's a pretty cool place. So here's what's going on in our state that might be different than your jurisdiction. We have lots of testing criteria just like you do. So I know they're building testing labs and they're building test tracks and they're building things around the world. Michigan is advancing out of that. We still have on the far right the American Center for Mobility, which is getting constructed, the M-City, which is the University of Michigan's research. This region is the 6 million people region, and you can see we've got lots and lots of smart corridors. The legislation that came down is what's significant for us in Michigan. We can put an autonomous vehicle, a level 4 or 5, on the road right now without a driver, lawfully in the state of Michigan. Now, whether you want to do that or not is a different question. When I drive past the General Motors headquarters or the tech center, I see that CT6 driving all day long, and it's wonderful and it's grand, but it scares me a little bit. But the fact is, in Michigan, we have legality for that. So we have the most legally open arena for testing in the state. So that's my environment. So here's my task force. You can see it's a conglomerate. I've got the State Department of Transportation. I've got our local road commission, which would be like a Bureau of Transportation in Montreal. I've got companies like Lear. I've got companies like HNTB, which is leading the design phase for a lot of the US DOT pilots. Planet M, which is the Michigan Mobility Group, Autotech, and others. IHS Markit, of course, knowing every company in the world. So our task force is pretty diverse. We got together not really knowing what to do. So what was our charge? And here's where it's different from what we're doing as a government entity than others. We're building a business plan. We were charged with something very simple. My boss said, I want to be the first county. If you're not familiar with what a county is in the United States, it's just basically a small province. We got 61 jurisdictions of cities and townships that we govern in some way. He said, I want to be the first county in America to fully deploy some type of connected ecosystem so that I can say we're first. That was the first charge. It's important in government to be first because you like to get reelected and all that stuff. It's nonsensical in deploying a system, but that was our first charge. Second charge is you don't get to use any taxpayer money. I don't want to see you going to the federal government. I don't want you coming to our board of commissioners. I don't want you to see going anywhere. I want you to build a business plan that says you can deploy a connected vehicle infrastructure utilizing private capital with a revenue model on the back end that allows us to be first in the country, really first anywhere, to try to deploy this. So it was a good charge. It was a challenge. So yesterday I got the opportunity to ask a question of some of my good colleagues from Ericsson and from Orange and others. There's a big debate right now between 5G and DSRC. We are DSRC advocates, and we have been at the FCC now for 3 years. And the reason we're DSRC advocates is because it's here. 5G is not here. If we were 5 years from now, and there was some validating and testing of that 5G, whether the latency could work on a peer-to-peer basis, we might be 5G advocates. But today we're not. We love it, but it's a future technology. Right now, we're struck with the difficulty of, well, how do we take DSRC as a technology from the test track and into the road? How do we develop regulatory framework on multi-jurisdictional issues? Just in my county alone, 42 different jurisdictions. But here's the big kicker. It takes 11 to 13 years to turn over the current car park in the United States of America. So if we're going to wait for this technology to get put in cars by OEMs, then we're going to wait too long because the technology will pass us by. I had a shocking statement from one of the automotives when we were in Pittsburgh last week that said, we're somewhat planning that autonomous will pass by connectivity, and we're less worried about being a connected car as we are about an autonomous car. That worries me, as you'll see why. So the aftermarket is part of our solution. Over 220 million cars have an OBD2 port. The auto companies like VW and others say, don't touch my OBD2 port. But how can we utilize that as a means of communication? Again, we're government. I'm not trying to sell a product, and that's the big distinction. So we have challenges, but we have a bigger challenge. All right, so here's my county. Lots of roads and lots of different communities, and there we are in Michigan. 42 different jurisdictions I have to deal with, which means if I want to hang roadside equipment, or I want to do a basics of an infrastructure, I have to talk to 42 different jurisdictional bodies just in my county. I have 81 counties in the state of Michigan. There's more than 3,100 counties in the United States. If you multiply the level of jurisdictions that would have to have some level of approval, then you might as well never, ever, ever try to do this. It would be insane. You don't have an overriding, mandated type of jurisdiction in the United States. So here's a bigger problem. 5,610 miles, over 9,000 kilometers of roadway that would qualify for some level of technology in 1,400 intersections. So here's the big challenge. Remember, I'm not allowed to use taxpayer money, and I have to deploy a network. Each intersection in our market, the way that we want to do it, will cost about $28,000 US. I'm not the greatest mathematician, but I don't have that in my back pocket. And I certainly don't have a mile of roadway, which we believe basic RSU, DSRC-based technology would cost about $12,000 to do basic infrastructure technology. So if we do end-to-end intersections and we do the roadway, you're talking $60,000 per mile with 2 intersections on each end. The economy doesn't work. So we have a big challenge. So what do? We divided ourselves into 2 tracks. One is important. Create an authority. Wherever jurisdiction you're in, and I travel all over the world in my economic development efforts, there are multiplicity of jurisdictions that will have a say in what happens with this. You must create some form of an authority so you can create a single source point of what's going to happen. In our area, not only 42 jurisdictions in Oakland County, in the region of Detroit, we're talking almost 200 jurisdictions. Form an authority. Don't go to the government to do it, form it yourself. Create intergovernmental agreements, which is what we're doing. This allows you to have a single point of planning. The second track is more important. It's our technological solution. We believe that we can do controlled spectrum sharing through the wave service channels, and we can make money off it as a government. Do you believe that? The government actually wants to act like a private sector and generate revenue out of a system. And so we broke ourselves into two sections. The first one, the model, we're talking about that a little bit. But when you think about the ability to develop region-wide programs, you have to have some other elements. What happens to the data? So who owns the data? Right now, the car companies say they own the data. If you talk to 90% of the room behind you, all of those companies will say they own their data. Everybody that has their own cloud-based system says they own their data. And all I'm worried about really is the basic safety matching that allows me to create basic safety protocol in my jurisdiction in my right-of-way. That's all I care about. How do we get those requirements allocated if I've got hundreds of jurisdictions that got to make that decision? So the purpose of an authority is very clear for us, because we're trying to create this. Now, I stole this from my friends in South Korea, and you can't read the words. It's not really intended for that. It's really to show the chaos of what a fully deployed, connected ecosystem looks like in a municipality. All of this is owned by the government, because I don't know too many places that privatize busing. I don't know too many places that privatize toll roads. I mean, they may manage them through private structure, but the government owns them. So all of that, as you create more and more data, you've got individual bus interface tolling, you've got crash avoidance signaling, you've got all of those things create massive quantities of the need to store data, to manage data. Well, who pays for all of that? Our technological solution. Use what exists. At least that's what we thought. We thought, well, there's all this great technology out there. Use what everybody's using, right? We even went so far at ITS 3 years ago in Detroit. We worked with HERE and PaxGrid and some other companies, and we actually geo-positioned a vehicle utilizing 2 RSUs based on DSRC. And we said, you know, we can geo-position a vehicle by just using bilateral RSU technology. And we did all of that. And we thought, well, we could layer in electronic tolling technologies so that we could create exclusivity to access and all of those things. And we decided we're on the wrong road. Because if you go down that road as a government and you're thinking, how do I deploy a network system, that onion can't be peeled. You can't peel the onion and say, I'm going to pick and choose these 2 or 3 things, and that's what we're going to go with. So we simplified. What do we know? Here's the most important thing if you're a government or if you're thinking about interacting in a network government-based system. Governments think of right-of-way as dirt and concrete. Right-of-way is no longer dirt and concrete. Right-of-way is spectrum airspace. The government must control spectrum airspace within its right-of-way. And it's so vitally important. The reason it's so vitally important, I don't have shareholders I have to approve of. I have constituents and residents that I have to get their approval of. Shareholders give their approval by saying, I like what you're doing because you're making me money. So say government doesn't control its airspace and its right-of-way, and they do in the United States what a lot of them do. They just give it to the telecoms to plant microcells so that they can utilize the future 5G and they can run all of these applications in the consumer network. How do we mandate that their first priority is that they have to provide red light warning avoidance signal? How do they mandate that Verizon Wireless with their microcells has a first priority of you must have accident collision avoidance warning notifications? How do we mandate that through that system that when an accelerometer goes off, it can immediately direct back to a road commission or a transportation department that there's ice, there's other conditions? If you think that we can, you're a better government and corporate person than I am. Government has to do it. So we've said, you know what, we can control the airspace. DSRC is available now. Don't worry about future technology. Basic safety measures can be priorities, excess balance. So here's what we're doing in Oakland County. We're going to do controlled spectrum sharing, and here's how we're going to do it. We're not going to worry about what goes on our network. In the 5.9 gigahertz range, that is that spectrum that's been saved by the FCC, there's 7 channels. There's 4 safety channels, and we love safety. We don't like people crashing into each other, and there's 3 service channels. At the FCC, there's been a big fight over we want to share that spectrum. So if you follow that all in the United States, then the Qualcomms and the Ciscos and others of the world, and they're all my really good friends, they would love to share that. We would love to share that with them too, but after we build our network. not before. Because again, we don't trust that they will do basic safety. Controlled spectrum sharing. Can we build a network that allows a smartphone to do one thing? Can I use IPv6 to tether a smartphone to an onboard unit that's embedded with software that talks to an OBU, or the OBU talks, and then the OBU talks to the RSU? That's all we want to do. Simple. I want to create a Wi-Fi hotspot with a cell phone in the back seat of my car. I want someone to be on my road in Oakland County that can surf the internet without having to use their Verizon or AT&T plan. Now that upsets Verizon and AT&T, I get it. That's fine. I don't care, they can be upset. As long as they can show me that their board of directors has authorized them to do crash avoidance signaling, and they will mandate that through their process, then we'll change our mind a little bit. But right now, I've been charged with build a network that creates revenue. This is the way we believe that we can do it. So the technological solution is, we think, pretty simple. I'm not worried about what would layer onto this. I'm not worried about what you would use on that. All I want to do is create the network and create the system. So what's been our progress? We've got the authority going. I've got dozens of jurisdictions that have signed on through intergovernmental agreement. We're completely complying with IEEE. If I have to explain to another high school class what 802.11 does and what the SAE specs are and all of those things when we're doing career development stuff, we've got all of that set. This is completely compliant with IEEE and SAE standards. And we're starting to deploy. So right now, in Oakland County, Michigan, we're not doing a test bed. We're not doing a validation center. We're not doing someplace where Continental can drive their car or Bosch can drive their car. And I've seen them all, and I've been up to the Upper Peninsula where Continental has their test track, and I've been to Ford's facility, and we try to avoid the GM cars on the roadway. We're deploying this network. Arata, which was a company we brought from Silicon Valley to Oakland County, have now bought by Lear. They've designed RSUs that have dual channel capacity, one for safety, one for service channel. We've designed the OBUs, the embedded software is there, and we're going to put on a road an open source platform network. All right, that's all we're going to do. And then we're going to prove it in Montreal that it works. So we're partnering right now with the transportation group in Montreal. They're going to deploy around the conference center in Montreal that network. So why would we do this? You might think, geez, go up against the big telecom 5G group of the world. Well, they're all nice people, and I hope they make tons of money, and I hope they do it in my county and employ lots of people. We do it because of this picture and that quote. That's my quote, by the way. I love putting this quote in front of people. If this is your only route to work, and to be in that lane, pretend both lanes go the same way. Every day you hit this, but that lane was a connected lane. How much would you pay to be connected? As an individual, how much would you pay to be connected? So pretend this infrastructure has an open source network based on DSRC, waiting for 5G 3 to 5 to 12 years from now, whenever it finally gets validated for peer-to-peer communication on the latency for safety, because that's what's going to happen. All of those technologies will not have access to this if government plays their cards right, unless there's safety validation. So right now there isn't DSRC. The proposed rulemaking at NHTSA is a positive step. So think about it in your world. In my world, there's freeways and there's expressways, and they get clogged. And if I had the ability to purchase a service that I could connect my car, and the security credentialing and the packets of that, as soon as I moved into certain areas, which is existing technology, again, back to the beginning, use what we know. How much would I pay to be in what is now called a high occupancy vehicle lane that I would love to have them be connected only lanes? Think about it in jurisdictions where you drive all the time, your commuting patterns. You as a consumer, not as an engineer, and not as an inventor, and not as a company owner, but as a consumer, what would you pay for? And how is that revenue back into the system? So who would you pay? Who would you pay to be in this lane? Well, the government has a couple of choices. The government can license that lane to someone else, and then they can hang things outside that jurisdictional right-of-way, and they can make money off it. But then who fills the potholes? I mean, do you put a contract together that says, third-party administrator, you've got to fill the potholes, or third-party administrator, you've got to update the technology? How do you do that? So the way we do it, and I'm wrapping up now, is simply do what Apple did. Apple did a pretty cool thing. How many apps can you put on an iPhone? You can put 800 of them if you got enough memory, right? How many applications can you layer into an open platform network that is based solely on the controlling of the airspace within a right-of-way area that allows the third-party administration of that to have basic fundamental principles? Layer on 15 different consumer applications. Build a process where the consumer says, I will pay for this and this and this and this. But at its basic core, you're providing basic signal messaging, basic safety messaging. So in Michigan, we have whiteout conditions. Whiteout conditions mean it snows really hard, really fast. Every year we have probably 30 to 100 people get killed in accidents because they drive into the snow and they're smashing into cars that have been stopped. If you deploy a DSRC network and that latency occurs, I don't think the person that is using Waze is going to give you enough time to react to that environment. So Waze is a great technology, but it's not a government safety first technology. It's a technology that can get layered onto a network. So this is what we're doing in Oakland County. The question at the top is a good one, I think. Well, are we right? I don't know if we're right. I'm the government guy. But I think we're right. And I think any system within any city in any part of the world that thinks upon the way that, can I deploy a network that people smarter than me can layer consumer applications upon, and I control the basis of it, so that they have to go to me and give me a revenue stream on the backside, I've created safety in my community. I've created a multi-billion-dollar industry for someone else, and I'm pretty happy. So with that, I think I'm supposed to leave a couple time for questions, and it just turned 0. How about that? Questions? So here's my favorite one. I'll close with this because there's a couple seconds left. So here would be my favorite application. I live in an area that has a big arena where the Detroit Pistons play basketball, and there's concerts, and there's all of these things that happen all the time. And my only route out of the area where I live that is more than a 2-lane road is past this arena. And every once in a while, I forget that there's events going on. I would subscribe for an application that would make my car connected into this network system to get warnings that already happen. So I can already subscribe to apps that give me warnings that there's event traffic. But what I would really love is to embed in a technology system that I'm like, the first 200 cars choosing an alternate route get bonus points. I would love to have this system. I would hit it, and I would immediately take a different route. And that would be tracked because of our connected network. Either GPS base or the DSRC base, whichever way we're tracking that I've avoided that traffic. And by being one of the first 200 cars, I get points. You know why that's cool for me? Because I like buying stuff. That would be very cool. Wouldn't it be cool when you think about, why couldn't a system like that be developed? All the government's role is to create that connectivity in DSRC and then allow the creative process to say, what would the consumer buy into that network system? We're getting so wrapped up in the idea of peeling the onion back and looking at all the different pieces of it, instead of getting out of the way and letting the industry overlap what the consumer is actually going to apply for that. So to me, that's my favorite one. But with that, I'll give you a little extra time, moderator, to move on to the next session.